Hello, okay, today we're going to talk about Mary-Kate and Ashley. I know that I'm not the first, nor will I be the last to talk about them. This is my series from Tik Tok that I did a while ago. I'm putting it on here now, and I hope y'all love it. Don't look there, that's all my clothing on my bed. Anyways, I hope that y'all enjoy it. If you do, like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff, and let's get into it.
All right, astrology-wise, they are Gemini suns, Virgo moons, and Leo risings. They sound like really fun people to be around, to be honest. Ashley is slightly taller and slightly older. She's also more reserved. Mary-Kate is the more outgoing one, and she's a bit more of a tomboy. Ashley is more business-oriented, and Mary-Kate is more of the creative one. And they eventually would play these traits up in future roles. But this is where they started out on Full House playing Michelle Tanner. They were not even 1 year old at the time that they started. They got their role on Full House because they were the only babies that didn't cry in auditions, and casting twins was actually a really smart move for Full House because that way they could work around the child labor laws, and when one twin needed a break, they could have the other twin. Apparently John Stamos was actually not a big fan of them at first though, because ironically they cried a lot. They're babies, so I don't know how ironic that really is, but they didn't cry in the auditions, so he was a little bit annoyed by them, but they tried out some other twins, and they just weren't the Olsens, so they stuck with them. They were also lucky because they got to keep the role of Michelle as she grew up. There was never a recasting for an older version, which is great, and I love when shows do that, or movies like Harry Potter, where the cast grows up with the film or the show. And of course, growing up on set, they were also growing up like around a ton of comedians, and they did say later on that sometimes they were saying inappropriate jokes and stuff like that they were hearing as a child. But they obviously don't remember a lot of the filming that went on because they were very little. And as I'm sure most of us know, Michelle became one of the most popular characters on the show. I feel like she was one of my favorites. But they didn't really make that much at all. But then they got a manager. And that's when they started making the money. And he got them a raise, $150,000 per girl per episode, which is a lot of money for being like 5 years old. Full House started in 1987, and I know it looks like we have just jumped a long time from 1987 with this picture, but it was just the only picture that I could find to note that in 1992, Mary-Kate started horseback riding, and that was something she did all throughout her life. She only stopped briefly in college. We're not really going to talk about her equestrian efforts, but she has won various awards for it, and I thought it was interesting to note. Also in 1992, and with a more accurate picture as to their age at the time, they did their first movie, which was To Grandmother's House We Go, and I have a vivid memory of this movie. They were 6 years old, and this was the first film that they were separate characters in, which was a big step for them, although I think that they did have a feature on Full House at one point where they played like each other's evil twin or something like that. I have like a vague recollection of that. And then they started their own company at 6. So when they found out that Full House was going to be canceled, their manager Robert Thorne knew that these two needed to start making their own material because they had star quality. He also knew that they were sitting on a landmine of a demographic, which was kids, young girls, tweens, teens, that age group, who would all, of course, love these two in whatever they produced. So all the content that they were planning on doing was for that age group specifically. So they established this production company named Dualstar for the twins, specifically for releasing movies starring the twins, all the movies that we know and love, which I am going to show pretty much all of them because I miss them. And they were actually pretty involved with Dualstar even from the start. They would sit in on meetings, and they said they always felt bigger than just being actresses, probably because they had their own company. They felt like they were building something, which they were. They were building an empire, a big-ass brand. And this is the first movie that they made with Dualstar, Double Double Toil and Trouble. I know probably a lot of people remember this. I remember pretty much all of these movies. I was obsessed with Mary-Kate and Ashley, truly. In 1993, they also started their Fun Club, which was basically a fan club where they would send out their fun zines, and also stuff like Mary-Kate and Ashley themed folders, Mary-Kate and Ashley themed bracelets and keychains, and all sorts of little merch things, which is so fun. And I feel like if I had full consciousness at this time, I would have been a member. Apparently, though, while I was researching, I found that they had a lot of like typos and misspellings in them. Sometimes they would mix the girls up when they were pointing to them in photographs, which I think is just hilarious. I guess they weren't super good quality, and apparently the merch wasn't super good quality either, but it's kids, so it's not that big of a deal, even though now they are probably fantastic collectibles. And through Dualstar, they started pushing out movies like nobody's business. They started after Double Double Troil and Trouble with The Adventures of Mary-Kate and Ashley, which was a musical mystery series. And they did that for about 3 years. This was my favorite one, The Case of the Hotel Whodunit. Spoiler alert, it was the parrot. And only a couple months later, they released How the West Was Fun. In May of 1995, Full House ended officially. But no worries, because they were already working on It Takes Two, which got released in November of that year. They then started the You're Invited to Mary-Kate and Ashley series. That went on for 5 years, and it was various parties. The costume party one was my favorite one. That's why I'm putting it up here, and I loved it. They also had various cameos in this time period, but in 1996, their parents would get divorced, sadly. Despite this, though, they seem to be still a really healthy and happy family. They also have 2 siblings, James, their older brother, and Elizabeth Olsen, who I'm sure y'all know, their younger sister. She's in Marvel. She's the Red Witch. I don't watch Marvel. Feel free to strike hate at me in the comments about it. It's just not my thing. But the Olsen twins are very much my thing, so let's keep going on them. So in 1998, they released Two of a Kind, which was their first TV show where they were the main characters. It was only 1 season, but they did love this show. They said they got to do a lot of outfit changes. There's a lot of fashion involvement for them, and they love fashion, as we'll see later on. So this was awesome for them. In November of 1998, they start on Billboard Dad, which was another series that was direct-to-video, as all of their movies were, well, up until New York Minute, but we're not there yet. And it ended in 2003. And as I said, they loved fashion. And then in 1999, they got to do their first fashion line with Walmart, which was called Mary-Kate and Ashley, Real Fashion for Real Girls. It was for ages 4 to 14, so kind of their age range and the people that they were marketing all their content to. And it also included beauty and accessories, which I think they partnered with Claire's on. And they were very clear about making this line very age appropriate, kind of conservative outfits while still being cute. They're very much trying to keep the wholesome brand image, and they have said that this line was all about the customer and making sure that everything was brand friendly and profitable. And future lines are not going to be as much this way, but this Walmart line went on for a long ass time. This was Passport to Paris, 1999, and since this is the first one that I remember boys being in, I will say that they fought over boys in casting. They would sit next to each other and whisper about who they thought was cuter, and they had to take turns picking which boy was going to be for which girl because they would fight over it, which, fair. I would totally fight over who was going to be my boy if I was in movies with my sister. And then in 2000, they got a deal with Mattel to make Barbie dolls, and they did this for 5 years, and it wasn't just these 2 dolls. No. They had multiple different dolls, multiple different looks, multiple different outfits, which to me, having one Barbie alone is the mark of being a big deal. But this many, huge. They'd taken over our consciousness. They also released Our Lips Are Sealed in November of that year, which was another fantastic one in Australia. It's 2001, and believe it or not, our girls are off to high school. And they went to high school in person the whole way. I'm sure it was still very different from, say, my high school experience, but I still think it's very cool that they did it all the way through in person. And fun fact, they went to high school with none other than Spencer Pratt. And apparently they did not like him at all, which is hilarious. Mary-Kate said that he was on the soccer team and he had a bit of a temper and would often storm off the field during games, which I don't think is surprising. They also had uniforms at their high school, your typical khakis, polos vibe. I'm sure we're all familiar with it and hate it. And they hated it too. And obviously, I mean, you're teen celebrities and you're forced to wear khakis and polos, give me a break. But they said it really blossomed their love of fashion because once they were done with that, they were done with that. And they wanted to be super unique, not like anyone else. And they obviously already were very unique, but maybe uniforms are a good thing because their style blossomed. It did. But first, while they were in high school in 2001, they released Winning London, which was their movie in London. And then they did Holiday in the Sun in the Bahamas. And they also tried to do 2 TV shows this year. They did So Little Time. It was canceled after 1 season, but it was another TV show with a lot of fashion, which they loved. I'm sure escaping the uniform was nice. And they also did Mary-Kate and Ashley in Action, which was again canceled after only 1 season, but pretty cool to do an animated show. 2001 was also the year that Miss Ashley got herself a man. Not a man, a 17-year-old boy. His name is Matt Kaplan. She was 15, so makes sense. He was a quarterback at Columbia, though, so they did do long distance for a lot of their relationship. They did it for 3 years, and there wasn't a lot of paparazzi shots because of the long distance, which is probably for the best. In 2002, they released When in Rome, which is in Rome. After this film, though, Mary-Kate dyed her hair brown, first of all, so she got a completely different look than her sister. But people also started to notice something else different, which was that Mary-Kate was becoming extremely thin, and rumors started flying that maybe she had an eating disorder. At the beginning of 2003, People released this issue of their magazine, The World's Richest Kids, and Mary-Kate and Ashley were on the cover because they were super rich, but they did not like that at all. They were kind of frustrated because they felt like they had earned all of their money, and a lot of the kids featured in this issue were heiresses and were born into wealth, and they didn't feel like that was a fair assessment of them. It's 2003, they're 17, and we're going to talk about their interview on 48 Hours for a minute because there was some really interesting things that came up when I watched it. So they said in the interview that they didn't think that they were good actresses, they didn't think that they had good singing skills. I disagree, as do many of their fans. They interviewed fans and fans said they're relatable and they're wholesome and they're fun, which that's what I agree with. And I think they're selling themselves short, or probably just being modest. They also discussed their manager, Robert Thorne, and how he was very controlling of them in those days, making sure that they were laying low, that they were keeping their image nice and tidy, and that they weren't partying and living a very normal life. Another telling point of events to come was when Mary-Kate said in the interview to Ashley that she looks in the mirror and thinks, "Why do you look pretty and I look ugly?" Which to me is so heartbreaking. I mean, I'm sure everybody with a sibling knows what it's like to be compared to your sibling, and I'm sure it's even more when you're in the spotlight and when you're twins, but it's so heartbreaking to me. They also asked them about what they thought their image would be like moving forward because they were on the brink of adulthood. And, you know, would they want to be like Britney Spears? And they said no, they were happy for her and whatever she was accomplishing, but they didn't want that image. They wanted to stick with the wholesome image that they had, which I think is easy to say when you're 17. And eventually they're going to grow and change, so it's fine. They're not going to stay squeaky clean forever, and no one expects them to. Mary-Kate also got a man this year, David Katzenberg, who is the son of the founder of DreamWorks, and he was with her during a difficult period of time where she also was changing in a lot of other ways. She started dressing differently, as you can probably see in this picture. Maybe it was just like a just out of high school rebellion, expressing herself finally kind of phase, but it became lifelong, totally set her apart, and she became known for her kind of boho chic styles that a lot of people said looked homeless, but whatever. And people have definitely parodied her styles a lot, and will for years to come, but I feel like most of the parodies of it aren't as much about her style as they are about her being paper thin. And I will say that a lot of these styles that she was wearing were very loose, which is a very good way to disguise that you're getting much thinner, but people were still noticing. And in May of 2004, they released New York Minute, and this was the second time that they had worked with an actual studio, and it was released in theaters, so it was a lot different from what they had normally been doing, which was direct to video. It also has Eugene Levy in it, who they apparently specifically wanted for the role, which, I mean, come on, of course. And unfortunately, it was also their last movie together, and Ashley's last time with a big role acting. The movie, as you can probably tell, played a lot on their different styles. Ashley was the sophisticated, classy, uptight one, and Mary-Kate was the edgy, boho, tomboy one. And they got to do most of their stunts for this movie, which is really fun, like driving, playing drums, crowd surfing, all of that stuff. I loved this movie. I still love this movie. It is fantastic. And they also came out afterwards and said that they didn't want to be called the Olsen twins anymore. They wanted to be called by their names, which is fair enough. Also in May, they host SNL, which is just a horrible photo, I'm sorry, but they had to pick between their senior prom and SNL. And they chose SNL, which we would all do. They did say, though, that it was a very hard decision for them choosing between SNL and their prom because they grew up famous and acting, and so it wasn't really anything new to them. So senior prom was still a big deal. They had been doing this forever, but SNL is a huge opportunity, and they had not done SNL before, so sticking with SNL. They also made a joke on SNL about Mary-Kate needing to eat a sandwich. Of course, there was a lot of jokes flying around at this time like that. And Mary-Kate made the joke, but of course, we know now that there was clearly some pain behind that humor. In 2004, they also did an interview with Oprah, which people have talked about more recently, I think, as well, because watching it back, the comments that she made were completely inappropriate. At first, they talked about normal stuff, getting allowances, the differences in their personalities, Mary-Kate's first on-screen kiss, just like normal wholesome stuff, but then it took a very quick turn. So then she straight up asked them about the eating disorder rumors, and of course they said there's always going to be rumors. So then Oprah decided to take another tactic, and Oprah just asked them straight up, how much do you weigh and what size are you? Which I'm sure we would all love to answer on national television. But they are trained, so they said, we're 5'1", which they are. We're petite, which they are. And it's not anything new. We're not going to answer what our size is. They didn't say that, but it was clear that they were uncomfortable. So they tried to laugh it off. And then Oprah was super condescending. After they just said, we're petite, she said, that's so interesting. And then she started talking about how she's obsessed with size, which we obviously all know since you just asked two 17-year-olds on national television how much they weigh. But then they said, well, if we were obsessed with it, it would be a problem, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it, Oprah? But it turns out that Mary-Kate was having issues, which makes it all the more inappropriate that she asked. To be honest, what did she expect Mary-Kate to say? Like, I have an eating disorder and I'm really struggling right now. Thanks for asking, Oprah. I would love to take this opportunity to tell the nation. No, that wasn't going to happen, clearly. Also in 2004, they turn 18, yay! And for their 18th birthday, they become co-presidents of Dualstar. And as soon as they took over, they knew they needed to start pushing out that merch. I think partially because they knew that Ashley wasn't going to be acting anymore, so they started to do fragrances, home decor, everything. They have said that it was really scary for them quitting acting, which essentially they quit acting after New York Minute. I mean, Mary-Kate was in more stuff than Ashley was, but they were never in film and TV in the same way again. But they were also very relieved to quit acting because it was a break. They needed some time out of the limelight, and they moved to New York, which there's a lot less paparazzi and attention on them in New York. So I think that was really good for them. Ashley and her boyfriend Matt Kaplan also broke up around this time. They said long distance was just too hard with her being in LA and him being at Columbia University. And then June 22nd, Mary-Kate checks into rehab for an eating disorder. If you need to skip this part, that's all you really need to know. Go ahead to the next one. Her family began to be worried about her. They noticed not only was she getting thin, but also there's a lot of signs that she was unhealthy. Because it really doesn't matter what weight you're at, you can still have an eating disorder. She had dark circles under her eyes. It looks like her hair is thinning a little bit. Those are the kind of signs that something's not right. And they were trying to help her. Apparently, they even took her car at one point and said that she could have it back when she gained weight. They had people watching her eat. People at her school also said that. Sometimes she'd get pulled out of class to make sure that she ate, or an adult would be with her while she was eating. But ultimately, her therapist and her dad decided to stage an intervention, and it was time for her to go and really go away and get help. And of course, rumors had been going around about this for quite a while, but people started to think that it might be your drugs, because the rehab facility that she went to specialized in drug and alcohol rehabilitation as well. So they had to come out specifically and say that she was in the rehabilitation center for anorexia, and that she was there for 6 weeks. After that 6 weeks, she said she felt a lot healthier and a lot happier, and a lot of people had a positive response to this. Of course, the tabloids weren't those, but her fans and other people were very supportive in the fact that she went and got help. I mean, she's a role model for young kids, and a lot of those kids might get eating disorders. And what should they do? They should go and get help. So in that way, you know, it's such a prevalent issue. She did what she could do, the best that she could do. And I think it's a good example to set, especially because she was circulating all around the Thinspo blogs at this time. She was big Thinspiration. So I think it was kind of a wake-up call for any girls looking at those blogs and any of her younger fans that, you know, that's, it's not normal, it's not healthy, and if that is the case for you, you should go and get help. Most people, though, don't think that she ever fully got better, but it's very unclear. She hasn't been to rehab since, but she also drinks a lot of coffee, smokes a lot of cigarettes, so that could be a contributing factor to her continued thinness. And again, she's a petite girl, so we're not going to assume either way. Of course, the tabloids would make comments for years to come about she was too thin, she's on an eating disorder, drugs, or she's gained weight, so she's fat and she's lost her figure. You can't win. Can't win with the tabloids. What we do know is that, of course, mental health will always fluctuate. She has said that there are days that are harder for her and days where she feels really on top of herself and feeling better. So I think, like everyone else out there, it's just a process. And shortly after that, they went to NYU.
All right, that was part 1. Part 2 is already up on my channel. I've just been splitting them into multiple parts for y'all just because I know that an 1.5 hour long video is kind of intimidating. It's better to give y'all these stopping points, I think. I prefer it personally in my own viewing. That's why I'm doing it. But part 2 is already up, so go ahead and watch it. Thanks for watching this one.